So without further ado, Beau, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Great. Thanks, Magenta. So yeah, I'm Beau Ambur. I'm a senior outreach lead with Kickstarter and one of a few remote folks actually based out on the West Coast in the Bay Area. I'm a long-time hardware tinkerer. I love taking stuff apart, designing my own electronics, and doing code as well. So in my day job, I work with a lot of creators that are looking for funding and looking to expand the reach of their project. So happy to talk about some of those aspects, but also really curious to dig into the more technical details and offer any insights I can in the process. And yeah, it would be great if you can kind of present your project. If you have a quick demo, that's great. I have looked at your Hackaday IO campaign pages, so I've got at least a rough idea what you all are doing, but it would be great if you pitch it to me as if I didn't know anything initially, and then might have some basic comments, or if you want to point me in a specific direction that you're interested in talking about, that would be great.
Awesome, thanks, Beau. So we'll go ahead and get started with the first project. Raul, if you could introduce your AI voice assistant.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Rahul, and I'm a student actually from India. So this is my first project. So what I have done is I have made a voice assistant which recognizes the word and gives the meaning of the word from the acquired data set. So it works completely offline, and yeah, that's pretty much what I have done. So this is the product which I have made. Right now it's just a prototype. So I have certain ideas of making it as a product and releasing it worldwide. So yeah, that's it.
Cool. What do you think some of your current challenges are? What are you looking to do next?
Since this is a prototype, I haven't thought that much big being a student. So yeah, my next step would be making it as a complete product. Like I have to make a perfect enclosure, and what are the commercial terms which has to be set for that product, and uh, like making it either open source. Since I use a Raspberry Pi, so making it open source will give an outreach worldwide. So that's what I'm thinking about.
Are you thinking of, with part of that open sourcing, that people can then either get a kit of all the parts, or they can source the parts and then build it themselves as well?
Correct.
Cool. So do you think you'll maybe develop a 3D printed enclosure or laser cut enclosure that people might be able to make themselves also?
Right now I'm working on a 3D print STL file which can be released on my GitHub link so that it can be made open source. So if you have a 3D printer, you can just print it, go to the store, get a Raspberry Pi, assemble it, and make one for yourself. So that's what I'm thinking about.
So with the prototype, have you had a chance to try this out with many other people yet?
Yes, I really enjoyed making this project because I went to, yeah, I guess I'm allowed to say the vendor, right? I had gone to a GRE center, a coaching center, where they teach English to other young students to train and clear GRE exams. So I went to them and I explained my project. I'm a former student of a particular faculty there, so he examined it and he felt it very useful. And I got a lot of positive comments from the uh, social medias, YouTube channels, and the other social media pages. So, yes.
So what do you think in terms of the Hackaday Prize? What do you think are your challenges in terms of how much further do you want to get with this project, given whatever time you have to put into it, and where would you like it to go in the next couple of months?
Generally speaking, I don't have a, a standard where I have to release it worldwide and I have to get 1 million hits. Nothing like that. Right now, I have made this prototype and it works well. And all I want to do is test with a lot of people and get a good feedback from them. So that will make me help. That will help me a lot in improving this product. And eventually, at some point, it will be a perfect product which can be released worldwide. So that's what I'm aiming about.
Gotcha. And yeah, and it looks like you've pretty well documented the getting started steps. Are you hoping to maybe attract a few people from the Hackaday IO community to build their own and try to replicate the process and maybe fill it in a bit?
Thank you. So that's one of the credit which I got from many of the followers from social media. So making it open source will help others to easily get attracted to the post, and they get inspired making this project just by posting a single video and giving all the code files and the tutorial for that will eventually make them get more interested in that particular project, which will help this product boost a lot.
Yeah, yeah, I'd be interested in trying one out, and I think I have enough parts laying around to get most of it going. But I like that. I like that as a starting point. You have currently available parts that are reasonably priced, so you know what you're going to get when you follow your guide. Um,
Yes.
one thing I was thinking is curious to be explored is I understand what you're doing with the language training, but also it seems like a really optimal device for voice interaction. Especially, you're saying it'll function standalone offline as well.
Yes, it's completely offline. I have recently I trained with 25 different words, GRE words, the technical words, and it gave a good response. So my idea of scaling it would be opening a spreadsheet where we can add all those words and the appropriate meanings for that word, which will eventually make it offline, and it is completely portable and it doesn't depend on internet, right? So even wherever you want to go, you can carry this in your pocket or in your bag, and it's, yeah, for an uh, obviously for a student it would be definitely a better companion.
Hmm. And yeah, I was curious too if you thought about using it for other general applications, like you could have a smart lamp or control other devices, and then that might be also a good training tool because you'd be practicing more in using that language. So, like for me, I'd be interested maybe learning the basics of other languages. And if I was traveling internationally somewhere, I could be practicing like, oh, how do I say turn on the light in Japanese? And I could practice at home by doing that. I wonder if there's some similar behavior support that would work with what you're thinking.
Actually, I planned for that, but I'm using Snips AI, the platform which I'm using for the artificial intelligence is Snips, which helps us to convert the speech to text and it process the language, right? TTS. So Snips supports literally 10 of the languages, not most of it. So yeah, that would be a great idea in implementing it in the future.
Cool. If you don't have any other specific questions, I might ask if anybody else has any questions or comments they want to share.
Yeah, I was wondering if have you looked at what else sort of is on the market and what competes with your idea you have here?
I gone through the market, but I haven't seen the equivalent product for this project. As Beau said, sorry for pronouncing your name. I'm not very good at pronouncing names, so
yeah, it's Beau. Like if you ever hear bow and arrow.
Beau, okay. So as Beau mentioned, there are a lot of offline devices which translate languages. Like, let's say I go to China and I don't know Chinese, and I can simply ask with that device. But in this kind of project, where we simply like the offline English translator, it's not just translator, it gives the meaning of that particular word, nothing else, right? Hope you get the project.
Yeah, definitely. I just mention it because I think that's something to definitely emphasize on your project page as much as you can, and something that you can get maybe even testimonials from the people that are trying out your version, to have, you know, little snippets of them saying how awesome it is in comparison to what's out there, or why it's different or why it's special to them and how they've been able to use it. So just a thought there.
Yeah, and uh, as you told before, in the market, I don't find any equivalent English trainer apps. Like, I wanted to release it as a personal English trainer, not as a translated device, basically. So I don't find any particular product which helps us train in English language. So maybe we can use this to train a lot of people with English.
Definitely. Okay,
Yeah.
well, if no one else has comments, or if you have no more questions, we can move on to the next project, and then we'll still have time at the end to go back if you guys think of anything for the voice assistant.
Uh,
Alrighty.
yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I have certain questions regarding making it. It's just a prototype, right? So I just want to make it as a product. So I have certain doubts on that. So maybe it's better to ask it at the last.
You can go ahead. You have a couple more minutes.
Okay. So, like making it as a product, do you think that releasing a 3D model for this project will help me boost the audience, or what would you suggest? Like,
Yeah, I would really like to see both. I think if you were able to 3D print some yourself to use for prototyping and sharing with friends, but then also put the model out there so people can create their own. I think that'll help you verify the interest in what you're doing, and then that can also help provide feedback to really kind of enhance the design. And at the same time, you can then use that to generate interest to do a more mass manufactured version. And I don't think you'll hurt yourself by putting the 3D printed model out there first, because once you get to the scale to mass manufacture it, you'll be able to offer it at a quality and a price point that's better than the 3D printing. So you'll be supporting some competition, but I think it's mostly going to be people that are really interested in building it for themselves. And you continue to support and promote the project, and people will associate the project with you. And if you have a more consumer version ready, then you're going to have that relationship to build on to sell to them. So yeah, I would totally encourage enabling as many people as possible to make their own, to start getting it out there, and then use that to when you get enough interest to create a injection molded version. Or there's also a lot of 3D printing services now that are getting pretty cost effective, where you can order on demand, and you could either buy in bulk from them, or people could order directly along with the parts kit from you and assemble it themselves. So there's quite a few options in between. So I would suggest exploring as many of them as you can, and then based on where you get the most adoption, putting more energy in that direction.
yeah, Thank you, Beau, for your suggestion. So that means a lot for me. Thank you.
May I just
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I saw your page and I don't see too many views there. And I think one of the valuable things or favor do to yourself is to go out and talk more to people. Maybe to start documenting your development process, your struggles, your problems, how you do it, what you do it, and talk to people more, probably. That's what I'm thinking. And then you may, from that, you may get new ideas, new developments, something totally new. That's what I wanted to say. Thanks.
Thank you, sir, for your comments.
Yeah, I'd really like to second that in terms of, and I think what Magenta was saying earlier too is if you can get some video with some friends and people using it, and it doesn't have to be the perfect product demo. It can just be, this is where you're at, and likely it'll find some things that you want to improve on. And then what'll be really interesting is if you start doing that, you'll be able to document the progression. And so you'll be able to show from the very early step of, here it does something, to that led to this, then this led to that. And it's great with you explaining and showing that, but also showing as many other people as possible using it and how it works for them. I think will really help get more people interested in following the project.
Actually, I have planned it to make as a video, so I haven't released it yet. So soon I will try to make it as you guys suggested me. I will try to publish it to several people and make some testimonials, and I will try to collect all those videos and post it. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. I think we'll go on to BikeOn. And then again, of course, we'll have a little extra time at the end if anyone thinks of anything else for Raul.
Cool. Can I start?
Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Aram. My partner is Shushanik. She's online too.
Hi,
and
I'm Shushanik.
We are building BikeOn. Here's the device. I don't know if you can see it, or at least you can compare to the size of my head, if it gives you anything. So BikeOn is a device that converts your bicycle to electric and back in seconds without any tools or skills. You just snap it to the wheel of your bicycle, it converts it to electric assist. You remove it, you have your regular bicycle again. With BikeOn, we are trying to solve a transportation issue in urban environment where there are challenges both on the road with the traffic and pretty limited storage space in homes, you know. So BikeOn allows the person to use his bicycle both as regular bike and electric. So you don't need to have just one regular bicycle and then one electric one. We were designing BikeOn to make it both practical and elegant without losing its simplicity. One of our biggest challenges was to design the device in a way that it could fit the wheel without losing its functionality, simplicity. Another challenge was to design the device for manufacturing, so it would be easily reproducible and really inexpensive in manufacturing. So we've spent quite a few years there. I think we have solved both of those challenges as for now. I think that would be it regarding my pitch or starting point.
Great. Do you have any particular questions or things that you want to talk about first?
I do have some questions to you. First question which I wanted to ask is, In your opinion, what should we do to become successful in this competition? Or if you want, I can rephrase it. What are we doing wrong so far? You know, in my mind, both are complement each other.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think this is a unique competition, and like Magenta said, we're not actual judges, but I can make a somewhat informed opinion, and the biggest thing is I'm just looking over the 5 guidelines for what makes up the criteria for successful projects, and I think number one is the concept. Like, if you want to win this thing, you got to have something interesting, and I think this is definitely something interesting. And personally, I like that it's bicycle focused. I actually went and rode my bike up and down the street just before this because it's like I'm not using my bicycle enough. And so and also I think it's a really interesting time for bicycles. Where are you based at?
San Jose.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I'm just north of you, and it's interesting in the U.S. like the bicycle culture, shared bikes and electric assist shared bikes have really taken off in some countries, and now we're seeing them all over the place here with scooters as well. So I think it's a really interesting time to have a product specifically for bicycles and with the idea of electric assist. That's super interesting and really important. And then I think how well you execute on that. So I've never seen anything quite like this in terms of that just snaps on, snaps off. I think it's a little more complicated than that in terms of you got to have the battery and these other things. But I totally believe in what I think you're doing, which is it'll work with a range of bikes. You don't have to do any kind of modifications.
Right.
And if it takes 2 minutes instead of 20 seconds, that's, perfect, whatever. That's not a deal breaker sort of thing. So it definitely the benchmarking category. So it would be really interesting to see some like head to head of here's a common electric assist bike and here's your bicycle, and show like, what's the general experience like? How do they perform head to head? How does it compete on cost and those sorts of things? So I think you don't have to be, the best in all of those things, but I think showing some context of how this actually impacts riding day to day would be great.
Yeah. Okay. On that note,
it.
like something I've been telling everyone I talk to in the competition is since we have the criteria outlined in the rules on the website, I think people should just go right through it and address each thing in their logs or description or latest upload, or via video or photos or diagrams, sort of on what Beau's saying. You could literally have a side-by-side comparison in an infographic or picture form or in a video talking about these two, what competes with your product, but really just going through the concept, design, production, benchmark, and communication, and addressing the questions that we bring up in the criteria. Like, how is your project creative, original, functional? How is it pushing boundaries? What have you thought about when it comes to scalability and manufacturing? What processes are you using? What's special about them? Are they sustainable? Are they, what makes them unique? And really call out all those things, because the easier you make it for the judges to find that information, that's, you're just that much more ahead of the people who haven't taken the time to do that. So that's my recommendation.
Yeah, makes sense. And then following up on the same question, I wanted to ask, we use some of the things which are open source in the product, but I don't think we're ready to make it open source completely. So do you think it might be a problem for us going forward?
I think you should stay true to your project, and what you're willing to share and what you'd like to keep private is totally up to you. in the rules, we state that it's not a deal breaker to not have all open source. So as much as you can make open source will only, boost it's how it's competitive with other open source projects. But depending on, all the other assets and what makes your project unique and special and, competition worthy, then they might level out the open source level.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think with this competition in particular, while it doesn't have to be open source, that's definitely a big inspiration for the community as a whole. I think it's definitely something helpful. But also, I challenge you to explore it in terms of, open doesn't have to mean free or giving it away. It's really, to me, what really makes it open is if I bought one of these, I'd really like to have a set of CAD files so that I could modify it and improve it and just understand it. And so, because I'm going to have it literally in my hands, I can pull out the micrometer and all those different sorts of things, but just, the easier it is to understand and assess, I think goes a long way. I understand there's business decisions and trying to not have to let go of it totally, but there's a lot of different models to explore there. And so maybe I would focus first of all on the area that you're most comfortable sharing, and maybe that's part of what's helped you get to this point. Like, are you leveraging any open source software hardware for the battery controller or the motor driver? I love the mechanical aspects of it, but also like myself, we've got a lot of electronic enthusiasts. So it would be really interesting if you wrote out like specifically how the electronics were designed for that, and maybe, why you made some of the choices that you made. I think because for me, like, I'm looking to learn from a lot of these projects as well.
Yeah.
And so the more that your project can benefit and educate the broader community, the more attention I think it's going to get, and the more it's going to resonate with the judges. And so, if there's some magic that you're doing with the way it attaches or the mechanical mechanisms, it would be really cool to see some neat renderings. And like, I'm still like, just how does this work? In terms of, you have the video and it's very obvious that it does work, but just it would be great to just understand like, how is it attaching and how is it connecting and that sort of thing, because it's super interesting. So yeah, talking about more of that, and then just finding a piece, like maybe it's just the electronics, and being really open about the design there, and then see how you feel about that. Maybe it'll make you want to be more open with other projects, or maybe it'll help validate, no, this is what I want to share, and this is what I want to keep to myself.
Yeah, that makes sense. We've actually, I started publishing some of the files there, not necessarily which I'm using right now in the current version, but I feel that I can actually publish, for example, the motor controller. We are leveraging the open source, the VESC motor controller with a custom-made PCB. And I have published it, and going forward, we will publish some other things as well, as much as we can. And thanks for the suggestion. I think we will make some rendering or something like that, which will explain and show more of the maybe the mechanical side of the device as well.
And I also think a lot about when it comes to the openness, like you're sharing as much of your process as you can too, like how you got to this final, because your product at this point is pretty finished. It looks great. It's functional, those things. So what was all of the struggle and triumph before that, and even what you were saying to Raul about, his showing the process, putting more logs in there as how he got to this point. I think that's something that is really important to this community, and something that the judges will appreciate, seeing, what steps you took as far as prototyping figuring out what didn't work and what you threw away, that's just as interesting to a lot of us.
Do you think the video about the process will work, or is the text better with the explanation of what we did before we...
I think both, either or, as much as you're willing to do. Yeah, I think they both resonate well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's something that I see this a lot with Kickstarter campaigns. The video is a really prominent feature, but there's also the text, and the best strategy is that they tend to echo each other. So they don't have to be identical, but some people want to absorb the information in different ways. So if you can cover the main parts both in the video and the text, and then elaborate in each as it makes sense to do, is really helpful.
Okay. I think it's thank you very much. I think it's a really good advice, because all those years the initial product was totally different. It was for front wheel. It was totally different, and it took many years to come to this concept, to look and feel, and and I think it's a really good idea. We'll publish. We have a lot to publish, a lot of pictures of 3D printed parts and everything. Yeah. And another thought which I wanted to put out there and listen to your reaction to that is that we came to this competition. We want to make those logs, we want to publish as much as we can, because we think that the more we go out there public, the more it will help us later on if we go to crowdfunding campaign. Then we think that people will know us more. There will be more connection between us and our potential supporters on whatever crowdfunding platform it is, and we would like to leverage this competition in that direction as well. Does it make sense? Is it?
Yeah, that's one of the biggest things for a successful campaign, is having a really strong community on day one. So the more that you can do I point people to Hackaday.io a lot as a great place to start building community, in terms of get that first 10 people, 50 people, 100 people, and then often starting to do a mailing list and having like a couple times a week, just sending out an update. Here's what we're working on now. And also telling stories that people want to share. So you're encouraging people and giving them an opportunity. Oh, I thought you might find this thing interesting. Maybe you want to share it with one of your friends as well. So yeah, for sure, building that community. And I'm a huge fan and believer in Adafruit, who their whole marketing strategy is they believe in putting good information out there is good marketing. And so the more you can talk about what you're doing and explaining your process and sharing it, that's going to totally pay off as marketing efforts in the future.
Okay. And then I see that we have just 1 minute left, unfortunately. So the one more question. I find that culture in Silicon Valley is heavily inclined towards the software projects. So my question was, how investable project like this is, because so far we've been bootstrapping. It's all on our credit cards, loans from family, and when we spoke to some people in Silicon Valley, usually it's like, do you have an app with strong service point? Oh, can it work without that? Oh no, then no, it's not interesting, So what are your thoughts about it?
Yeah, software is definitely the big focus, and hardware was really big a few years ago. And it's interesting. I think it's coming back in a smaller wave now. So there's definitely resources out there in Silicon Valley for hardware. But the other thing is, to me, Silicon Valley is venture funding, and that is really about growth and explosive growth and pouring rocket fuel on things. And that's rarely the right way to go. And so I think, thinking of crowdfunding and other approaches I'd be looking for, partnerships with the bike manufacturer, bike rental, or something like that. I think there's a lot of alternatives for funding. And also, like Magenta's saying, is the product's so mature at this point that I think you could jump ahead in conversations to building partnerships, and crowdfunding could be the right step to scale the manufacturing as well.
Okay. Thank you very much. I see that we run out of time. Unfortunately, I would like to continue this conversation, but maybe next time.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. And definitely, Beau will have more sessions, and we'll have more sessions for people to sign up for with other mentors as well. So you can look into those. They're all first come, first serve. So you're welcome to sign up for those again too.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you guys. All right, and last but not least, Jeannie from SEAL.
Perfect, thanks. So SEAL actually started with a very real life problem. We are a team of high school students, actually. I'm the coach, the mentor. And we live in Porter Ranch, which is one of the suburbs of LA. We're only about 40 minutes from Pasadena, maybe 30 minutes without traffic. And we noticed that our trash cans would get knocked over a lot and the trash would spill out and it ends up in the LA River, which of course then ends up in the ocean. So the students came up with this idea where we would use an accelerometer to detect when the trash can gets knocked over, and then that would engage an electromagnet, which then locks and remains locked until the trash can's uprighted again. And that makes sure that when the trash can is on its side, the contents stay inside. So it's a really relevant, realistic problem. We have a working solution, a working device, which is exciting. We have the first prototype completely in the trash can, ready to go. Our second prototype is working right now. And our third prototype, which is based on a PCB, we're hoping to have done by August. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
Cool. Any particular areas you want to? Well, I'm curious. Like, you're working with high school students and mentoring as well. So, like, how's that approach been? And do you find anything particularly unique challenges in this process?
That's a great question. Actually, that was going to be my first question: is how realistic it would be for a high school team to do something like this. So we received a grant for this year to get the prototype up and running. And with the grant, we've gotten 3 prototypes at the end of the year that we'll have functioning. It's been fantastic. There's a reason I'm a teacher. I love students and seeing them get this idea where they're going to solve a real world problem, and then we actually have a working solution. It's so cool. My kids are so passionate and motivated. I haven't had that many issues other than, when it was AP testing time, we didn't hear from anybody for a couple of weeks, and finals week, everybody shuts down. But in general, it's been really just, it's an exciting process. So I haven't come across any issues in particular yet working with high school students for the process. I do have one concern where, so we're switching right now, our system is Arduino based. So we use, our original one was an Uno, and that was way too big. So then we reduced our size using, we tried trinkets and Metro Minis. We've reduced to about 1/3 of our original size, but now we're switching over to PCBs. We've got a source that's printing our PCBs right now, actually. But that means that we're learning to code in C, and my students don't know that yet. So I think that right now, even though they're high school students, I'm imagining that those are problems that everybody goes through in the prototyping process. You start with one system, and then making those little changes means you kind of have to learn as you're going through. So.
Yeah. And again, these are great stories to tell with your updates and documenting the project as well. So in terms of like the chips and the switching, I see and rolling your own Arduino it's tough, but there's a lot of information out there that you can kind of patch together to make something work. the one thing I'd suggest looking at is, I'm a huge fan of MicroPython,
Okay.
which is, I've struggled a lot with C, and like I always tell myself, oh yeah, I'm gonna start doing this in assembly, and it's just I don't have that kind of time. But MicroPython I find is much more adaptable to first time coding, and there's also a pretty big community for it now. And there's some inexpensive chips. STM32 were the most common, but if you look at a lot of the new Adafruit stuff, they're doing something similar with CircuitPython, and I think the SAMD21 I think is like their favorite starter chip. And those are relatively inexpensive and don't require a really complex board if you wanted to create a custom PCB. And it actually makes some things easier than Arduino because it has like basic USB integration. So they're a lot easier to flash and bring up than some of the other chips.
Yeah, we had a little bit of money left over from our last grant, and so I was on Adafruit for a couple of days just going through and saying, oh, we could use that. Oh, maybe we'll use this. And I love Adafruit, so I'll definitely check out those resources. So realistically, our big goal for this prize, if we got it, would be to create a pilot program with LA Sanitation to actually get these into trash cans. So we can make probably 50 devices and get them into trash cans. So we already have the relationship with LA Sanitation. We've taken a field trip over to some of their warehouses to check it out, and they're at least willing to talk to us, which would be great. And I think that would be a really interesting component, but I think in order to get there, we need a little bit more funding to make that large push for 50 or more prototypes. So is that realistic? Like a high school project?
I mean, I think it depends on how much time you have, and then what is it going to take for those resources? Like, is that something the students are going to throw a bake sale for and fund, or I mean, we do have like quick starter campaigns, so I'd be super excited to see someone do a really quick campaign to make 50 prototypes. It would require a reasonable amount of effort and may or may not fit with everybody's resources, but it's certainly possible. So yeah, it's and also like it doesn't have to be perfect, in terms of maybe at the end of the day you can only do a few of these, and have to do a bigger run afterwards. But from a student perspective, if I was in high school, that would be awesome, because building like 50 boards or testing 50 of these, you do really get more insight into how the production manufacturing works and how important testing is and all those sorts of things.
Agreed. I think this year our focus was getting a few working prototypes, but we always envisioned it as a long-term project. So our year 2 is ramping up from 5 prototypes to 50 prototypes.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely something you can include in either the description or the logs, wherever you want to put most of your writing. But that's something that addresses the production category of the criteria, like directly. Like, this is what you're thinking would be your next steps as far as scaling. Is you want to get to 50, and this is how you would produce them if you had the funds. And I think that's something really, interesting and exciting for the judges, to see why you guys want this funding, or how that would contribute to the next steps in a really tangible way. So I think it fits right in there. And again, I would recommend, like I said, going through those criteria and addressing them directly, and just making it super explicit what you guys are thinking when it comes to each of those categories.
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah. And I would try to, rather than look at what the disadvantages of a student team are, is what kind of advantages can you create out of that? And, really, like, I imagine there could be some fun, creative, more social media campaigns of somebody dressing up like an animal and going through the bin or whatever, and just, making it a fun summer project to share. I think you'd have some unique opportunities to play with there. One thing I was just wondering is, how does it know the difference between, have you figured out the difference between getting knocked over and the garbage truck picking it up?
Yes. So what we've done is, when we went on the trip, we actually videotaped the process of picking up the trash can. And before it gets picked up for the trash can, it goes vertical for about 6 feet, and then it gets tilted over. So we've got a secondary system that says if it moves this far in the Z-axis, then don't engage. So we've got like a disengage. That way we have a built-in system to turn it off in the trash can removal process, which we've done a little bit of patent searching to look for other similar devices, and that's one of the things I think that makes us unique. So that's certainly something we're going to have to talk about somewhere.
Great.
May I just add? So I just wanted to say, I am actually I would love to buy such a device, but the application would be slightly different. I was thinking to make something like this. You know, I live in a townhouse community, and we have a problem that somebody comes and dumps his trash into your bin, you know.
Yeah.
And you never know who it is. I don't have time to, you know, I wanted to install camera to figure it out. So I was thinking to make a device which is add-on to the garbage can. Once the truck, you know, came and left, it locks the can, and that's it, you know. And I would be willing to pay for that device. No, you know.
Yes, we've actually thought of a couple of systems, because I have an alley behind the back of my house, and I've had the same issue. Plus, I talk about people going through and looking through the trash can. So we've talked about other ways to lock it, so that in addition to just the magnet, having other locking systems. Right now, our focus has been just using the accelerometer, so the angle that it gets knocked over. But one of the long-term goals would be to expand it. I think for us, that's like what we keep calling a year 2 versus a year 3 project. For us, that might be a year 3 project, just so that we can get the 50 working devices for our wind problem, and then start to tackle all the other problems as well. Because you're absolutely right. Maintaining that lock is really helpful in a lot of situations.
Yeah, and we have pretty large community here, and emails going back and forth. We have some internal communication here, and I know that it's a real deal problem for many people, you know, because that trash sits in your garage for the next week, you know, for the entire week. It's yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm the guy who I'm willing to pay for it, you know.
Okay,
Thank you.
good to know.
Cool. Yeah, and yeah, definitely something I'd be curious about is exploring the difference between having a latching mechanism versus the electromagnet, because I can see a lot of potential advantages, especially with something battery powered. But also, I totally think, like, initially go with what works. Like, build a prototype that functions. It doesn't have, like, the battery might die after a few hours. Like, you know, figure out the things that it needs to do, and then figure out how it can do those things better. And yeah, so I would and it'd be cool to talk about that too, in terms of, like, well, why not just start there, you know?
Actually, that's a really good point, because we've had a lot of advisors coming in this year, and one of the things they always ask is, why not a mechanical system? So why do you have the magnetic system? And part of the answer is that was the original design. So we've tried to take that as far as we can. And then let's now compare that to other systems, because you're right, absolutely. It presented issues with our battery. So trying to figure out how long we would need to power it, what type of battery would be best from the user perspective. We're having those conversations. They're always ongoing. And we definitely haven't ruled out a mechanical lock. We think that we can build a mechanical lock into our current system. So our current system, we're now calling it a modular case, because it's got multiple components that can easily swap out. And we can swap out some of those components and get rid of the magnet part to a mechanical lock if we need to at some point.
Gotcha. So I just want to throw out one other quick thing for totally for fun, which is I'd be interested in seeing some creative A/B testing in terms of non-electrical solutions. Like, what would happen if you just put a cinder block in the bottom of the trash can? You know, does that, you know, just because, again, I think these would be the things where being really creative and having fun with telling the story.
Yes.
You know,
the field was hilarious. We heard some great stories from the trash collectors about methods people have gone to. So we actually have heard lots of tape stories. We've heard the cinder block story. We've heard lots of wind prevention mechanisms. So we can definitely include some of that as like a little gag reel or something, something cute, little kitschy stories.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.